miles before coming to water, 26 miles farther before reaching Bagley's trading post. By then, the men he followed would need fresh horses. They wouldn't rest these horses out before riding on. That took too much time, he told himself. Men like Royal Tarpis, Silas Red Gantry, Dockery Latin never wasted time when they were on the move. Out in the open this way, these men instinctively moved as if someone was on their trail, whether they knew it to be a fact or not. Men with blood on their trail, Sam told himself, knowing there was a younger man leading the gang these days. That man was the Cheyenne Kid, and he was known to be ruthless. But now the Kid was wounded, bleeding. He'd shot and killed 2 men and Phoebe, a bank teller and the town sheriff. The sheriff had managed to put a bullet in the murdering young outlaw before falling dead in the street. Sam had picked up the men's trail the following day, and he'd been on it ever since. Sure, they knew someone was coming. Sam drew the barb to a halt at a break in the trail and looked to his left across the chasm where the fire roared, smoke filling the sky. He took off his left glove and felt the barb's withers. The horse's coat was dry, hot to his touch. So was his own left cheek, he thought, raising his palm to his face, feeling the prickliness of his beard stubble, noticing the stiff, scorched sensation along his cheek line, the dryness in the corners of his eyes as he squinted them shut for a second, gauging the heat. Untying the bandana from around his neck, Sam fashioned a curtain of it beneath the brim of his sombrero and draped it down his left cheek. It would help some, he thought. I hope I didn't lie to you, Pard, he said to the horse, recalling his earlier words to the animal. He picked up his canteen hanging from his saddle horn, uncapped it, swished a mouthful of water around in his mouth, and spit it out along the left side of the horse's neck. He leaned forward in his saddle and poured a thin stream of water down the horse's muzzle and along its left side, taking in his own leg and back along its flank. The horse shuddered and chuffed and reached its tongue around to lick at its side. That's all for now, Sam said. He capped the canteen and rehung it. All right, it was hot, but he'd expected that, he reminded himself. 3 miles ahead of him, give or take, he saw the fire had waned on its push southward. In the wake of the billowing inferno stood a few bare and blackened pine skeletons. But he and the horse were safe. He had calculated the risk before putting the horse forward onto the trail. Had the wind made a sudden shift and blown straight at them before they'd reached the trail's halfway point, he would have turned back and raced to the top again before succumbing to the heat. Halfway down the trail he'd realized there was an end to the fire a few miles to the north, the direction he was headed in. From that point, had the wind changed suddenly, he would have raced down the trail, whichever way they'd make it. And oddly enough, he thought, owing to the rise of heat, it had been hotter atop the trail than it was here below. Still, it had been risky, said a cautioning voice that often admonished him at times such as these. Yes, it had, he admitted. But he let out a breath of relief. Life is not without its risks, he quoted to himself. Who had said that? He shrugged as he nudged the horse forward. He didn't know. Probably some obscure penny dreadful author who had stood or imagined himself to have stood on just such a trail as this. He started forward along the lower end of the trail where he knew the heat would be less intense. As he rode, he shook his head. Leave it to men like these to ride into a wildfire, he thought. Why had they done that? But as he asked the question, he had to remind himself that he had followed without hesitation, so closely that he'd had to water both himself and his horse down to keep up his pursuit. What did that say about him? He didn't want to think about it right now. He rode on. 4 miles farther down along the chasm trail, he felt the heat on his left begin to wane. A mile farther, the temperature had subsided enough that he was able to take the bandana down from his face. Beneath him, the rusty barb road had a stronger gallop. Along their left, beyond the buffer of boulders, dirt, and shale, the woodlands lay blackened and ruined, smoke still rising. It was slower.